Welcome everyone, and welcome back to Destination Think Virtual Forum. This is our third and final session of the week. Thanks for joining us, whether you're here with us live or listening to the recording. I'm your host, David Archer, Marketing Manager and Editor at DestinationThink.com. I have a few notes before we begin. Today's session will last up to 90 minutes. And we all really appreciate the questions that you've sent in when you registered, and our speakers have designed today's keynote presentation to address many of those. If time allows, we're also going to save time for a Q&A period at the end. So you can submit questions during the talk using that Q&A box that you'll see at the bottom right of your screen. And if we're able, we will address some of those questions. Our speakers from Destination Think today are Sarah Prud'homme, our Senior Strategist in North America, Frank Cuypers, our Senior Strategist in Europe, and to kick us off, I'm going to pass it over to Rodney Payne, our CEO. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David, and hello, everybody. In our virtual forum this week and in today's presentation, we're going to be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on travel and what destination marketers can do about it. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that the crisis that the world is facing is first and foremost a humanitarian one. We're facing enormous challenges in our industry, but our minds are also with the people directly touched by illness, those responding to help them, and those who are working to keep our society open. It's not until the health crisis is resolved that life will be able to start finding a new equilibrium. To continue to support destination marketers through the COVID-19 crisis beyond online presentations, our team's created a Facebook group that is growing in popularity far beyond what we'd expected. If you haven't already joined, it's going to evolve into a very helpful place to connect with our team and your peers from around the world so that we can help navigate this crisis together. The group name is COVID-19 Support Group for DMOs, and Destination Think is committed to managing this group and helping everybody through the crisis. So please feel free to share any thoughts or questions you might have there as you face your own challenges over the coming months. We've run many in-person events all over the world. This is the third session of Destination Think's first virtual forum dealing with the COVID crisis. Today's presentation will focus on how to manage your destination and lead your travel industry through a crisis. Yesterday, we talked about communication, what to be doing now as you adapt to your communication focus and resources, and what you should be thinking about with one eye to recovery. And on Tuesday this week, in the first session, our Chief Strategist, William Backer, presented on strategic planning. And both of those recordings are available online. If you've missed them, you can go and find them there, and I'm sure they'll be very helpful in addition to what you'll hear today. And lastly, before I hand off to our presenters today, beyond the series of presentations that you'll hear this week about what destinations can be doing in the mitigation phase of the crisis, we're also exploring a variety of initiatives that we can potentially initiate to lead and help our industry. We're hearing from people at destination marketing organizations all over the world about what resources and information could help you with planning, communications, and destination management, industry leadership, and into recovery campaigns. What tools or support would help you in those efforts? And we want to understand how we can help. And we know many of you are facing huge challenges with budgets, needing to do more with less, and dealing with significant challenges and competing priorities within your destination. And we really believe that none of us should do this alone. And we'd love to talk to you over the coming days and weeks about how we as an industry can collaborate. So please, if that sounds helpful to you, connect with us at destinationthink.com/join the network, and we'd be happy to talk to you a little bit more. So now I'd like to pass to Frank and Sarah to talk to you about what they've been thinking about with our team and working on with our clients in the hopes that it can maybe help you in your own management of this crisis. Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. I present this to you from home, which is 6,000 miles, 9,000 kilometers from where Rodney is. And like many of you, I sometimes think, where is the life that we have lost in living during this crisis? These are very difficult times, and we're all put to the test right now. But someone who has never been put to the test will never know his own strength. And that's what we want to talk about your strength as an industry and about the hope we want to give you and the hope you can give. Hope comes always from other people, but that means that you also can give to others. You can pass it on. And that is the humble thing we try to do here during these 3 seminars. So as we are speaking about bouncing back and revival and what have you, perhaps some of you have noticed that there is a book written by Albert Camus, a classic from 1947, is Stopping the Charge Again. And I need to, sorry, hello? Right, sorry. It's Stopping the Charge Again. Why? Because this book is about the lockdown, and the writer, the Algerian-French writer and philosopher Camus, wrote about a city, Oran, that nobody could leave anymore. And rather than a novel, it is a report of the plague and the different reactions of people during the crisis. Why I'm telling you this? Because I use this book also at university and in business schools. And I say to you that this is the ultimate manual for different attitudes you can have during a crisis. You have Father Panelu. That's the one who is pointing with his finger and swaying with his arm in church. And he says, this is a revenge of God. I told you so. This is your punishment, and so on. So that moralistic attitude is something we see all over the place in articles and blogs. All the gurus who only make the point that they were so right. I told you so. There is even gloating about tourism for those who are a fan of the Daily Show. Thank you so much, Trevor Noah. Then you have Cotard. He's the one who wants to make money out of the crisis by helping people escape. And this is what I would call an opportunistic attitude. These are the guys that write in their business blogs, never waste a good crisis, which I consider as something very inappropriate. So the language of winners and losers is very unsuitable and unbecoming in a time that there is no income, that there are so many layoffs and job losses. Then you have Raymond Berg. He's a journalist, but he's not writing at all. He's not reporting. The only thing he wants to do is getting out of the city because his beloved one is somewhere else. That is the role of people in denial. And unfortunately, we have them also in our industry. A few leading people in the industry wrote or said that everything would be back okay by June. And then you have Thoreau. He's a very likely character. He's the congenial one. He's friendly, full of empathy, suffering with the others, but actually he is doing nothing. And that is a very passive attitude, right? So the only attitude left is the one the writer identifies with, and it's the only right leadership you need in the industry right now. That's the role of the main character, Dr. Rieu. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he's a doctor. He heals people. And Rieu is not a moralist at all, but he has that famous quote that everybody who has read the book knows, the plague that are we, meaning I have to deal with it and I'm going to fight it. I'm going to face it. And this is the leadership style we need for now. And it echoes what the Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget once said, in times of crisis, people will rally behind the one that is the best organized. So that's what we try to do. We try to organize this presentation as good as possible. And therefore, as you will notice, we maintain the scheme that we introduced last week and that we used in our strategy webinar as well. What to do during the mitigation phase, what during the restart phase, and when or what to reimagine. So I leave you in good hands, people, because you'll be for a while in the hands of sweet-voiced Sarah Prud'homme.
Thank you very much, Frank. Before diving into our thoughts on what your focus should be in supporting the industry in the mitigate phase, I'd like to just take a minute and say thank you. A thank you, like a sincere and heartfelt thank you to everybody who's listening in, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us. As I was falling asleep last night, thinking about today's webinar, I actually felt myself feeling a really strong sense of gratitude, and a really strong sense of gratitude to all of you who have tuned in to listen to this, whether that's live or catching up afterwards. That's because we know that you're here out of a deep care for your industry, your team, and your stakeholders, and that you desperately want to help in any way that you can. Perhaps even in spite of challenges that you yourself may be facing as a result of this crisis. I worked at a DMO for nearly a decade with an excellent team who I still regularly miss. So I feel your pain, and it's certainly like our hope that we're able to provide you with some useful advice as you navigate these challenging phases of this crisis. We're very fortunate to have a wide cross-section of representation on the line with us today, from national tourism organizations, provincial and state level DMOs, to all the way to one or two small person teams representing rural areas, and everything in between, towns, cities, and regions as well. So we've certainly done our best to be able to look at the situation from a cross-section of what might be possible based on your abilities and resources, striking that balance between some specific tactical actions as well as some bigger, bolder, braver leadership directions. But I'll begin with what many of you are doing right now as we're focused in the mitigate phase before Frank takes you through what's possible in Restart and Reimagine. So one of the questions that came in was from a small rural destination asking what are some things they could do as a DMO to support and encourage their partners during this crisis. So where we want to begin before we dive into the what to do is really to take a moment of pause and think about and consider the impact that the industry is facing right now. The world has really been in free fall for the past weeks and months. It's really important to think about the ways and consider the ways in which people and communities have been affected. They're immense and diverse, but really fall into three major areas. First and foremost, psychological impacts. People are dealing with loss, dramatic loss of staff, budgets, revenue. They're potentially dealing with health effects personally, health effects of loved ones. There's a risk of potentially losing their businesses altogether, or even potentially not even being able to meet basic needs of food, shelter, and health care. So there's also underscoring all of this, the deep grappling with the uncertainty of the situation and where we're going. So it's really important to consider how your industry is being impacted as you start to look toward how you can help them in this phase, and a lot of excellent actions are taking place. But when we think about how DMOs around the world typically support their industry in business and usual environments when the world isn't in the midst of a panic, we're doing things like cooperative marketing campaigns, hosting press trips, bringing influencers to the destination, creating video or social content. And often some of the biggest concerns we hear in normal times from clients is that they want to make sure that everything is fair, they're providing a good amount of support to their industry, a solid number of referrals are driven. But when you're supporting your industry through COVID-19, that landscape looks completely different. We find ourselves in a completely different reality. The nature of support that your industry needs is really vastly different than a business as usual environment, where advertising and referral generation may have been the order of the day. In the mitigate impact phase, your industry doesn't need a destination management organization. What they really need is a crisis management organization. So another question that we had received was, as we'll be working with a smaller staff due to layoffs, what are the most meaningful activities to engage industry partners? So we'll definitely get to that as we dive in as well. So in this phase, as you think about making a pivot and a transition from, at least during the mitigate phase, moving from a DMO into a crisis management state, it's really, really important that you recognize that being an industry leader means being a community leader. Destinations are places where people work and live, and there is no separation between the public and stakeholders. And it's really a time in which we need to step forward to be able to provide the types and kinds of support that people really need. So the first area of support that you want to focus on being able to provide your industry is in assembling the right team to be able to meet the needs of the impacts that your industry is facing. So that means taking on new and different roles, and obviously also reallocating resources as well. So the first area of action that we recommend is reconfiguring your team to be a crisis management team. The core roles and areas that you really need to focus on is making sure that you're doing really solid strategic and scenario-based planning. That was the focus of William's session, that you are in, and to the best of your ability, providing financial aid, guidance, and support. And that must, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. That may mean taking on a much more hands-on approach than typical. I know a lot of us have been able to pivot our marketing skills into crisis communication skills, where we're assembling research and information, and also being able to aid in relief and supporting in government relations and lobbying. We looked at a ton of different research papers, a ton of different academic papers. We analyzed, what activities were core in responses when destinations face crises like Hurricane Katrina, other disaster recovery scenarios, post 9/11 and post fires. And this is what we really found to be the best way to configure the organization and really make that shift from destination marketing to take and gain a seat at the destination management table in your approach. So the next area of focus that we think is critical during the mitigate phase is ensuring that you are aiding in relief efforts. And what that can look like is you getting involved in securing food access resources for your industry and making sure that you're able to contribute in helping with stability of housing, the healthcare of frontline tourism staff, as well as symbolic behavior. So you cannot solve all of these problems. It's not possible, but you certainly can help. And again, in considering the needs of your community, identify where aid is required, because you can certainly, and you should be playing a leadership role in leading collaboration with official government organizations, NGO, other entities within your communities. An important thing that often happens in the rearview mirror is places around the world are often remembered for how they handled crisis, and this is really an opportunity for you to step into a space to really positively contribute to the crisis and make sure that you are helping to meet people's most basic needs, which is not a traditional role for a DMO at all, but what is essential in this instance. So last week, I shared an example of Mammoth Lake Tourism doing just that and stepping into the place of starting a food bank for their local community because they were confronted with astronomical unemployment rates. But we also were able to look at a couple different examples as well that are emerging from around the world. The first one is actually right in the backyard of where I live. I live in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And there's a small town near here called Langford. And what they have done is actually provided free hotels to healthcare workers. And I know there's other examples of this as well around the world of places and spaces being repurposed to support those most in need. So this is an instance where those healthcare workers who are serving on the front line and at a much higher risk of contracting COVID-19, rather than add additional burden to their the weight they're already carrying, they're afforded a safe space to stay, so they don't have to worry about bringing home the illness to their families, which is a great initiative of helping to aid in the community. Another example from across the world is the Pan Pacific in Perth has actually launched a pilot program at the end of March, where they are offering safe spaces for self-isolation to the homeless community in Perth to help them and those who don't have the privilege of having self-isolation spaces that are safe that they can stay in. This really is allowing them to have that space as well as help contribute to preventing community transmission. But what's really notable and maybe a little bit difficult to read on the screen right now, though, is the response from their online community. It's people talking about it bringing tears to their eyes as soon as they're able to go and travel and even do a staycation. They said that their first stop is going to be this hotel out of like gratitude and appreciation for the contribution to this crisis. So it really is, again, that piece of how you conduct yourself in a crisis can really leave lasting impressions on people's minds and memories. The last area in terms of aiding and relief is less tangible in terms of making like physical contributions of spaces and places, but what this really talks about is symbolic behavior, and a lot of DMOs have excellent communication and marketing expertise that could be repurposed into this space. So the academic definition of symbolic behavior is a bit heavy, but it's symbolic behavior is an encoding process in which items or actions are used to represent something different. Engaging in symbolic behavior elicits a network of experiences. So the example that I had shared here was window scavenger hunts bringing Canadian kids together nationwide. So this is one example. Other ones are the Italian people singing on their balcony, and which is incredibly beautiful and moving. Here in Vancouver at 7 o'clock, everybody gets on their balcony and bangs pots and pans. So what these really stand for is hope and resilience and unity, and this is really eliciting strong psychological benefits for communities. So an important area to consider as well, beyond just the physical forms of aid. And then lastly, a really tangible area in which you can contribute is supporting your industry through the financial aspects of this. And that could look like reassigning a person on your team to being a relief expert, distilling down all the information. We're seeing a lot of resources, which we'll talk a little bit more about in the next section, but this could be actually walking your industry through how to apply for aid, having that relief expert distill down all of the information that's out there and provide clear guidance, getting on the phone, supporting them and walking through their applications, and opening the phone lines can be a really tangible way in which you can support your industry through this. And then the next area of focus during the mitigation phase is communication in crisis. And we've seen a ton of great work in this area from around the world. And similar to that body of research that I mentioned earlier that we dove into, what we found was similar principles being recommended to be applied in this space, being human and empathetic, and ultimately you really can't overdo industry relations. So taking a look at our first example, Tourism Australia is hosting weekly webinars and a weekly webinar series to be able to provide guidance to their industry on how to handle and grapple with the situation currently. We often find that people are concerned right now about over communicating to their industry or bothering them because they're feeling like they're quite busy and overwhelmed. Our perspective is leave the phone lines open, reach out and connect and communicate to them, even if you don't hear back. Like those who really are looking for like the sense of connection and support will reciprocate, and those who don't will certainly appreciate you reaching out and connecting at the time. The next example that I will chat about is avoiding over reassurance and acknowledging uncertainty. So what we want to do in this instance is making sure that you aren't erring too far on the side of the communication teeter-totter, as one communication theorist suggested it, which is if you offer too much reassurance, sometimes that can backfire. For example, if people are feeling one extreme of an emotion, whether that's outrage, concern, or fearfulness, reassurance can sometimes intensify that emotion because their perception may be that either you're not telling them the full truth or their concerns aren't being taken seriously. So this example, Frank, if you don't mind popping to ahead, from Destination British Columbia illustrates scenarios they have laid out that are best case, likely case, and worst case. And what this does is really paints a clear picture of like what is potentially possible. And from a psychological perspective, this actually makes it much easier for people to be able to grapple with it because they're able to like mentally prepare for different realities. So that's important. And the next example from Fáilte, Ireland, this is an excellent example of creating a resource for people to be able to go to and use. And they cover an immense number of topics, all the way from business liquidity to managing temporary closures to how do you deal with layoffs and redundancies, jumpstarting sales when the time comes, and offering weekly webinars. We fully recognize that, again, because of the wide spectrum of people who are on this call, that may not be possible for all of you. So your version of it might be opening your phone line and picking up the phone to talk to people when they call and answer these questions to the best of your abilities. Just offering and opening up those communication lines really makes a big difference. And if it's possible to create robust resources, that's excellent. It's really going to help support your businesses within your destination. But picking up the phone and giving them your best possible guidance is also great. The next example we'll look at is mobilizing locals. One of our clients we work with is Visit California, and we work with them to develop an initiative called Takeout Tuesdays, which is calling and mobilizing locals to action to take out and support their local restaurants and creating a degree of ritual around it. Takeout Tuesdays, Takeout Thursdays. How do you mobilize people to be able to participate in supporting businesses in a way that even goes beyond just the general call out for support, but creating it something actionable that they can participate together in. And then the last example here actually comes from the city I used to live and work in and be participating in and being at the DMO and my old team. So this is how to support local in Calgary. Calgary is a city with a very specific and unique and amazing and resilient community spirit. So they have deployed the initiative Love YYC, which is the airport code, Love YYC from home, and outlined really clear and specific ways that you can support your local businesses, attractions, arts and cultural organizations, and community groups, all from the safety and comfort of home. So moving into the final area of focus that we really recommend during the mitigation phase is adaptation. Similar to what we talked about at the beginning about adapting and pivoting your team, we want to help lead your industry in adaptation as well. You don't have all of the answers, and there's not an expectation that you do. So a really powerful thing that you can do and a really powerful way to demonstrate leadership to your industry is to engage them in collective problem solving. That could be collective problem solving on what kind of symbolic actions you could lead as a community, what kind of response actions you want to take, again, to the scenario planning, contingent brainstorming, collective problem solving around if this happens, then we will do. Another form of engagement you can also do is striking a task force or potentially task forces. How could you pull together specific and individual expertise within your destination in place. Maybe you've got a revenue expert, maybe you've got, you know, community groups expert, a transportation expert, and be able to harness the power of the collective task force to tackle some of these problems, particularly if you are in a situation where your resources have been severely limited. We fundamentally believe, whether in times of crisis or in times of you know, business as usual environments, people want to participate in the solution, and action in a crisis actually allows people to find control, and it's a way to recruit people's worry into action that will help alleviate their anxiety. So it presents a really good opportunity, not only for them to be bought into the solutions that you land on, but also to be able to take, you know, all of these potentially challenging feelings they have and feel like they've got movement forward, which is really important. The last couple suggestions we would have is holding, you know, virtual workshops. Get everybody involved in ideation. Ideation themes could be around creative ways to generate revenue. It could be about planning for the future. It could be about dealing with particular sector problems together. And then lastly, just again, creating that two-way dialogue, whether it's literally opening your phone lines or opening other forums for engagement. That's really, really important. And so moving into key takeaways for the mitigate phase, it's time to pivot. It's time to shift from destination marketing into destination management and crisis management during this period. We really recommend, as hard as it might be, to pause and make really conscious decisions about where you're focusing your activities for your mitigation activities, because what we want to make sure is that what you do is allocate to the biggest areas of impact, what limited resources like you may have, and then taking the time to find the way that works for your place and your industry to lead collective problem solving. Sharing in the dilemmas and having people participate is going to make a really big difference for your outcome, and keeping an open mind to uncover possibilities as well. There could be something that, you know, had never previously been imagined before. What are the blue oceans that you can create for your industry collaboratively together? So moving into restarting your industry. I know this is the phase that we are all anxiously awaiting for when the time comes, that through our successful collaboration together and heeding you know, the very important government and health advice, that we're in a place where restrictions on movement are lessened because we've been successful in curbing the spread of COVID-19. This is a phase that you can definitely prepare for during the mitigation phase. If you haven't had a chance to listen to, again, William's webinar on strategic and scenario-based planning, I highly recommend that you do, because it will help you prepare for this phase and different scenarios we may find ourselves in. And as much as it may be really, really tempting to launch straight into action, you need to fight amnesia. We've all just learned some very important lessons, and it doesn't mean that you need to fully bake out communications or tourism emergency plans right now, but it is critical to take a moment of pause while everything is still fresh in your mind, whether that's calling a team meeting or a brain dump or a workshop or whatever form you want it to take. Capture all of the things that you've learned so that you're able to make it a key organizational priority moving forward, with the ultimate goal of creating robust tourism emergency plans and fully embracing the principles of crisis preparedness and management, and also ensuring that these are included in national emergency mechanisms and response systems moving forward. And then campaigns will obviously be a big bucket of activity and a big focus, and an area that we have heard a lot about from clients, and there's a lot of anticipation here. A thing that we want to flag to everybody is destinations around the world will be doing the same thing at the same time, which is inviting visitors back, and not necessarily precisely the same time, as we recognize that different places may be opened at different times, but it's going to be really, really important as you think about the resources that you have, where to focus. We're having a conversation actually yesterday as a team and saying it's really going to be important that while everybody else zigs and takes a certain approach, that you zag. And it was introduced into the conversation that there's actually going to be so many people zigging and zagging that you might almost need a third move, which is something like a zog. But the thing I want to impress upon you is questioning what you're doing to make sure it's going to be as effective as possible in what is going to be a very, very crowded marketplace. And we recommend that the very best place to start is to root your restart campaigns in civic pride and root them in the truth of your place and your place DNA and a place of authenticity, which Frank will talk to you a little bit more about right now.
All right. Hi again, everybody. Let's speak still a bit about what Sarah said about zigging and zagging, and let's go back in time after SARS. What did we get? A lot of similar campaigns, most of them inciting civic pride, which is awesome. Let's call a place Utopia, then you got Utopia Strong, Utopia More Than Ever, Utopia Open Again, and so on and so on. And expressing pride of your locals has always been the best place marketing, from I Love New York till I Amsterdam. And be honest, everyone tries to copycat then. But my worry is what comes after that. Everybody in the industry will play the same game. And don't forget, this is the first crisis of such a global scale as long since I live. And for those who not know me, let's say this is at least 25 years. So this is for the industry not only a time to become symbolic, these are times to be symbolic. And Sarah used the expression already many times, but what does symbolic really means? It means that you communicate by expressing what you are, but you do it through your community. And just let me explain it by two strong examples. The first one is Lesbos. Now, in 2016, this Greek island was on the front lines of another global crisis, the one of displaced people. And they even have been called by the press something like ground zero for Europe's migrant crisis. So the island provided shelter for thousands of people who came across the sea. You can only say the citizens did their human duty. And as a result, the world can be very cruel. Tourism dropped with 90%. Half of the residents were about to lose their job. And then there was a simple idea from a visiting volunteer who not only provided humanitarian assistance, but also recognized the need to sustain tourism because she wanted to support the residents. And she started posting positive stories about Lesbos under the hashtag #MyBeautifulLesbos. It was embraced by the locals and was later on picked up by people all over Europe. I remember that very well. And a lot of people who had visited the island, actually. And it's probably one of the strongest grassroots action ever. And our own David Archer was there and wrote even a blog article about it. And the second example is my favorite one. It's about one of my favorite places, Ireland. And Ireland went through many, many economical crises. So when economy is up, they really top the charts. When economy goes down, they really go down. And at a certain moment, they asked themselves, what can we do about our reputation? Who are we? And the answer was, we are an island of artists, which is more than true if you've ever been in Ireland. And I'm not going to mention you two and the Sinead O'Connors and the many winners of the Nobel Prizes literature, but we speak about the creativity of the people, the pubs where people still sing, but people of the tourism industry that all seem to be natural born storytellers over there. So what did they do with it? Ads on BBC, ads on CNN, billboards in airports, we're an island of artists? No. They changed one piece of fiscal policy, and if you could prove you were an artist and met certain criteria, of course, you had not to pay taxes. That made Ireland go viral in these days. So what is the cost of the campaign? Actually nothing, because this is policy thing. So as an industry, you have to come up with these ideas that are rooted in your identity, this kind of symbolic actions, because the combination of creativity and honesty will always beat the one who has the most dollars. And then the next one is be yourself. And here comes my second and biggest fear. As I'm speaking now, a number of promotion campaigns will be in the process of being feverishly developed somewhere on a campaign drawing board. And what are you going to promise? the same as always. So there is also a huge risk of over-promising after a crisis, and as a consequence, under-delivering. So please stay true who you are. So the industry should not go after a more of the same approach. You don't have to. Every place is unique, even if you're a small rural place. Your history is not unique. Your mountains are not unique. Your ocean, if you have one, is not unique. The friendliness or the grumpiness of your people is not unique. Neither is your economy, but it's the combination of all these elements that gives you a unique footprint. Stay true to it. Or like Dr. Seuss once said, you are youer than you, and that is truer than true. Next one is create in the rebuild phase new partnerships. And this is really about your role after COVID-19. And it will be a new role. And it will be a small step for a DMO, but it can be a giant leap for the industry. Because it will be for the DMO one step back. And instead of being the promotion gun of your destination, you need to become the ghostwriter of your destination, the scenario planner, the one who enables and mediates, the one who fills gaps in the communication, the one who leads by example. It's really time in this stage to manage your destination. And the core of all that is in what you're doing right now during the crisis. So if we speak about a new landscape, I made in the past jokes about what I call the battle lasagna because it's a very layered landscape. Be honest about it. What do you have? You have local, regional, provincial, national, federal DMOs, not to forget the state level. So if every layer is doing the same and has a different kind of messaging about what you have to offer, what do we get? We get noise, a cacophony, right? Create a restart committee. This is an opportunity to rethink what the definition of the industry actually is, right? I heard this morning from an Australian colleague, believe me, we have many of those in the company, that Australia started a national think tank for tourism. You can do this on your own local level and broaden your network. So what about the transport sector, education, the sports people, the cultural world, agriculture, of course, the community itself, and last but not least, partner with digital investment platforms. This last one is really about you. You are the industry, and I assume you're all listening from home now. And be honest, people, some of you sometimes curse about a virtual world. I was doing that in the beginning of this presentation, by the way, because something blocked in my computer, and there is always something which does not work, doesn't it? But you all know this is not the future. This is the new now. So there is a role for a DMO in bridging between digital investment platforms and tourism entrepreneurs and even co-invest in them. This is probably the most important section of what I have to tell for the rebuild stage. This is and I want to show you this slide. 3 years ago, we co-created this chart with hundreds of CEOs and VPs from destinations all over the planet. We did it in New York, and this is where the industry said that was their biggest nightmare, a loss of relevance. Look in detail to that chart and think about the time we're living now. Look about changing industry landscape. The industry landscape will be disrupted more than ever. Yesterday, one of the major airlines, the Lufthansa Group, announced to shrink. Eurowings will cease to exist. Brussels Airlines will shrink, and so on. The CEO of Baltic Airlines said in a Skift article, there will be no quick fixes. And what about OTAs? Will they benefit as people have experienced the ease of a digital life, or is on the contrary, will people become more selective than before? And to the right, you have the risk of undiversified revenue streams. I got an email of a Danish DMO who want me to contact them with Americans, and New Zealanders ask us how the grant system in Europe works. So everybody knows that in the industry, and everybody knows that is your vulnerability. But the last one, not understanding or the lack of understanding the value of tourism by stakeholders, your local community, that is probably an opportunity to change that immediately right now. The industry shows a great heart during this crisis. So what can you do to stay relevant? First of all, avoid dependence on one single activity or market. If you're only known for beaches, it can be that your recovery time will be much longer. Address the underlying shifts in demand. It's quite possible that some of your markets will not be open. It's quite possible that you have another competitive status and that some of your competitors are slower or quicker. New tourism experiences. And perhaps this is the time to become serious about supporting the rural regions. I can imagine that the first tourist that goes to Italy wants to play safe and perhaps will choose agriturismo over a city trip. What about disadvantaged communities that perhaps have suffered even more? What about the rapidly growing interest in the holistic way indigenous people think about the world? Are you going to prioritize them? And last but not least, what about the money? And again, diversify, diversify, diversify. You've got probably temporary suspensions or loans or mortgages and so on. Can you negotiate to have them longer? What about relief funds? Great examples from Victoria on Vancouver Island till Berkeley in the United States. Relief funds. Can you do a crowdsourced similar action in your place? Flexible implementation of rules. Is it not now time to negotiate fiscal flexibility for, and let's hope it's not going to happen, but for the next crisis? Can we systemize this? And design special promotion. I think this is probably the time to reward loyalty more than ever before. And then we come on the third stage, and somebody sent us an email and said, when is it time? When do we know when it's time to reimagine tourism? Well, as we said during these 3 days, if you mean activation, that is not now. You're still in the mitigation phase. But thinking about reimagination of tourism, that is absolutely this moment. It's now. And Reimagine is not a song by John Lennon, by the way, although you may think I am a dreamer, but in the industry, I won't be the only one. Because I see a quick growing number of your colleagues seem to understand that it is now or never, and you will be with many, and you will have to do it with many. So we got another question of a local DMO that said, please, can you give us a concise plan with detailed steps, what we need to do the next year? But we also got a question from an NTO who asks for a plan about stakeholder management for the next 6 months. So the honest answer is no, we can't do that in one webinar, as you are such a diverse and segmented audience. Everybody was welcome, everyone who defines himself as industry. But I don't want to let you down. So this is a plan, and it's a good one. It's in German. Don't panic. It's not to tease the majority of the English native speaking people that are listening right now, but simply because we are an international company. And I'm happy to share it with you. And I know there's also an English version, and it's easy to find. It's from Zukunft Tourismus. I know Catherine Fisher well, so it comes from a good place. But there are also many other plans to be found these days. So I have been reading and listening, like my colleagues, a lot of stuff these days and nights. And I selected for you a very good article, and it comes from Freedom Lab. And as you know, the crisis of our industry lays bare existing problems, and some of these can become a target for society to address in post-corona society. Problems can become visible, either because they add to the spread of the virus itself, like poor accessibility of healthcare in some countries, but that is not our task as an industry. But problems can also become visible because current measures against further spreading of the virus show us what the world could look like. The articles about the clean air in Chinese city, the blog post about the crystal clear water in Venice, that's what I'm talking about. So this chart can help you to make you think, where are we going as a travel agent, as a DMO? What kind of world will I serve? Will we keep surfing on that wave of collectivism, or will it be individualism again? Will we more globalize, or will we deglobalize? And what about the axis of preparation and prevention? And I also found this postcard, and it's from QO agency, and honestly, I don't know him, but I really liked it, and it's about the future of travel. And they spoke with Citizen M COO Michael Levy, so one of the travel industry, and it was about the likelihood that the travel industry would change as a function of COVID-19. And Michael pondered the ramifications of social distancing for his brand, Citizen M. And you all understand that because they have staked so much of their identity on communal spaces. And he considers the need to stand by the core of his brand, Citizen M, even if he acknowledges that they have to adapt to what he anticipates to be the new normal. He says literally there will be no way back to the old normal. And these last words, the new normal, well, I don't like I said last week in the webinar, but I need to repeat it. I don't like word like recovery because it contains the word cover, like in covering up. It's really about a new normal, and a new normal asks for a new way of thinking. So if we speak about redevelop, we really need to think about what that redevelopment can look like in that new normal. Because you're not developing anymore for an old world, you're now developing for a new reality. Okay, so, and this is the classic stuff you will read everywhere, and I love it, and it's absolutely tangible, and it's spot on. This is about investment in infrastructure or not. So probably you'll need to invest in new infrastructure, but maybe you also have to think whether you have to invest in that visitor center in brick and mortar in the future that you had planned, or you have to rebuild one of your major events. So this is about prioritizing. You have to incentivize transformation. And as we said already, the industry has to upskill. So we've seen good initiatives over the years, from remarkable experience programs to accelerator. I've seen hackathons, or like Tel Aviv did, they gave working space to digital startups in visitor centers. But unfortunately, these are still exceptions. Reconsider skills and develop human talent. Do you have a data analyst working for you? What about what's going to happen with trade fairs? How will digital impact your industry and the meeting industry, and so on? But this is what you will find everywhere. What people probably do not tell you is that places have a life cycle. And it's like a product life cycle. Demand will always change in time. And by the way, places hardly die. They never die. Take, for example, Detroit. Detroit was declared dead and bankrupt years ago, and it's bouncing back again. So what will happen is that after the corona crisis, some destination will have made a giant leap backwards or upwards. And you will see that your supply chains will be reorganized. And what about your markets? Some will be open and travel sooner than others. And what about the damage for your operators and your offerings? What about your events? What about your competitive status, like I said? So you might not be the #1 for rock climbing, but if your competitors stay longer closed, that may change. So the industry really needs to understand that you all will have a new starting point, and we don't know exactly how that is going to look like for now. So the new normal means that the industry will have to deal with a new situation, and I will try to give you a glimpse how that looks like and speak briefly about your community inside, your community outside, and last but not least about inclusiveness. So redevelopment will be community-based in 2 ways, right? One is your community inside. So if you as an industry want to stay relevant for your place, you have to do it community-based and stay close to the people. Now, first look at that community inside. So our friends of Destination International interviewed Leslie Bruce, the CEO of Banff Tourism. And she emphasizes that the destination organization needs to be, and I need to quote this, a catalyst for hope, good deeds, and community optimism. And the Banff area is supporting and helping each other like in most of your destination. And Leslie and her team are on the front lines. Like you can see here, they're posting every day the good news from the destination. One is the decision by the community to put their Christmas lights back up at home, showing some holiday spirit or magic. It echoes what Sarah told you, the scavenger hunts. Here in my city, in Antwerp, in Belgium, we put teddy bears in front of the window for the little toddlers and when they do their daily walk. But my point that I want to make here for the industry is a close connection between tourism and community has been established. This holds now for many DMOs. Will that be temporary or is it the beginning of something new? Well, I have news. Co-creating with a community is something places have done already for a long, long time. And there is a lesson that can be learned for the industry. And this lady is responsible for it, Jane Jacobs. She must be by now a poster girl for every urban planner. Jane can be considered as a mother of grassroots planning. And she launched the expression, the urban village, as a reaction to the corporate village, right? What about the tourism village? And that is how placemaking is born. You make a place by continuously consulting your local people. Now, if we speak about placemaking, people think on things like this. Physical spaces, no new park or benches anymore without consulting your neighborhood. But placemaking is also this, digital placemaking. I heard Michael Bloomberg saying years ago on a conference as mayor of New York City, how is it possible that a company of the West Coast, Google, decides how people in the major city of the East Coast have to move in public space? Because according to the algorithm of Google Maps, you always had to turn right, which caused congestion and traffic jams. And that's probably why Waze was invented and later was bought by the Google guys. The point here is also digitally, the community will always fight back. This brings us back to our industry, our world, the world of placemaking and tourism. And some of the people listening will giggle as they recognize this slide, but sometimes you need to be stubborn, which I am, because I think this is more valuable than ever. This is about the industry's future. This is a formula, and I only use formulas, by the way, to make me look smarter than I really am. But this formula is saying that the performance of a place or the quality of a place equals the place experience plus the external communication plus the internal communication. And I think the two first parts of the comparison is something everybody in the industry understands. The time of convincing people in a pushy way is gone. That's what Steve talked about yesterday. That's what Sarah said. What really drives your reputation is word of mouth, and word of mouth comes from bad or good experiences. We get it. But the latter part is an element of placemaking that we added. No place marketing possible without engaging your local community. And that is what you do if you work in tourism. You market a place. And that is what we do with you, with our clients from the industry, because we think that there is no other way, knowing from experience that there are so many disasters and pushback from locals towards the industry. We try to co-create as much as possible. And this goes from research to strategy to communication. You will, as an industry, have to redevelop by co-creating with your community. And then you are a true leader. So this is my call to the industry. Take heed. Your locals have plenty to say about the place they live in. And if you ignore it, they will push back, and they will push back after Corona more than ever. So that brings us to the second party that is on the rise in the new normal for the industry. There is another community or communities that can help you to redevelop. And these are the communities with whom you have established a strong connection. And I referenced last week in the webinar that in the French-speaking world, there is research that has been done about the pace with which places can bounce back after a huge crisis. And some places do that quicker than others. One of the explanations is that those places that have a strong appeal in passionate communities will be held by those communities. Take, for instance, Brussels very quickly bounced back after the bomb attack. How did that come? I was then here in Belgium. After 2 days, we saw posts of people that love comic books all over the planet, what Brussels is known for. Can we help? Can we do things? Oh, we regret this. Paris is a no-brainer, like the art communities was so shocked, and again, a lot of sympathy, empathy, and really tangible help. And I don't want to be accused to be Eurocentric, so another great example is Sri Lanka. A lot of people feared for them after the bomb attacks a year or two ago. But what actually helped is that the DMO consequently have branded themselves as a cultural destination. And the history buffs and the cultural people, they kept coming and they kept them alive. And this is why more and more colleagues of your industry have understood that having a deep dive in a passionate community pays off. Not only because people with a real passion for what you have to offer stay longer and they spend more, but most of all, it makes you less vulnerable. Right. And as I spoke last week, and I already referenced this, some places, so in a DMO world, size does not matter. And this is a DMO, it's a county, it's in Indiana, it's called Elkhart. It's probably a small county for the United States, but it's definitely a big one for a European. The DMO, though, has less resources than the European DMOs, but they tick all the boxes. And what I see is that they have built up credibility by co-creating their community and reaching out to passionate communities in the world. And it won't be easy, as it takes some time to build up credibility in the community, but this is an outstanding example in the industry of a long-term future-proof vision. So, rethink. I just saw a video of the city of Eindhoven and I liked it, and it says Eindhoven, hier binnen verzinnen wij morgen, which is very Dutch, and it means Eindhoven, stay home and rethink the future. So, last but not least, let's talk about the industry and the urgency of becoming inclusive if you want to stay relevant. Some people will even blame the world of travel and tourism for this crisis. And how can you deal as an industry with that? First of all, Corona is not a surprise. It has been predicted by many people. And one of them, one I know, is Ian Goldin, who wrote the famous book, The Butterfly Effect. And in that book, he predicted that systemic risk issues are on the rise. And they could be endemic everywhere, in supply chains, in infrastructures, in ecology, economics and politics, but also, he wrote, in pandemics. So what to do about it? Well, Ian says you need to add elements of circular thinking and circular economy into your business space, your tourism space, your industry. And we know them. We do that. We do that on a micro level. I was last year blown away by the Crown Plaza in Copenhagen, as they seem to be to have a very circular system, from solar panels to groundwater, smart heating and recyclable materials, and, you know, rent electric cars like they do in Austria, in Werfenbeck. Redistribution of food waste. You have these cool apps Too Good To Go To. That's one I discovered in Denmark. Olio, that's one I discovered in London. My family, under pressure of my daughter, I have to say, we use the Tap app. So we always know when there is drinkable water somewhere in the neighborhood. But you can organize it also on a destination level, on a planning level, on a DMO level, or like here, this is a cool example of Whakatane. So long story short, credits of the photo and the project go to Neil Hutton. But there in New Zealand, when he arrived, they had almost no kiwi birds left anymore. And it's a very, very vulnerable animal. And he set up a project that was funded by tourism. So selected, exclusive, expensive people could have walks with very experienced guides and see where the kiwi birds hide. They have a zoning plan, which are the zones where you can't go, not to disturb the animals. They have a signage program. They have a program to train dogs to leave the kiwi birds alone. And they're now rebranded as the kiwi capital of New Zealand. And this is another one. This is the Ökoregion Keindorf. This is the ecological region in Keindorf in Austria. And this is a community that choose for a circular life, and they are in that biocharting, enriched soil. Now, to sustain that and to fund that, they allow tourism. And it's a very flourishing kind of tourism. And last but not least, I referenced that in the webinar last week as well. I was sitting 2 weeks ago with the CEO of Bay of Plenty, and she said, this is my plan to get out of the crisis. I'm going to execute a tourism with purpose plan, which is about reduction of CO2 emissions, which is about the plastic ban, which is about being serious about your souvenirs, right? It should be locally produced and so on. And again, I think that is a good example of long-term thinking. So, people, you have been staring for weeks now to this chart on your television, on your computer, on your cell phone. This is the famous COVID-19 chart. Can I suggest that we keep using that chart in the future, but that we just replace the dotted line of the virus by the Earth's capacity? That would be awesome. Then we would be leading as an industry. Or like Jeremy Refkins once said, from a win-win situation, we have to go to a win-win-win situation. Stop sending the invites to a third party, which can be the local community, the indigenous people, which can be unhappy visitors, which can be Mother Nature. So I'm going to wrap it up. I have 6 takeaways. And the first one is fight, don't deny. This brings us back to the very beginning. There are no winners or losers, and denial is not possible any longer. So face a situation, and that's the only way you can lead. So this is also about the 3 sessions all together. I talked this week with a lot of DMO's friends in Canada, and hear stories about layoffs of 50%, 60, 80% of your staff, and I feel for you guys. We gave over the last 3 days the thumb rules based on what we know, and others do. Be there for and support your industry, provide revenue and value where you can, stay close to your community, communicate, but be cautious about your tone of voice, have your scenarios ready. The second one is something Sarah talked about today, be creative in your adaptation, and I like that word creative. Let's make a deal from now on, and let's call tourism industry from now on a creative industry. Community at the heart. The community was at your heart during the crisis. Can we expand that, or are we going to say, see you at the next one? Recovery is an illusion. Back to normal is a road that will be blocked. Redevelop and co-create, and actually, to be more precise, it should be redeveloped by co-creating. And last but not least, the future is now. Be inclusive in your plans and anything you do. This industry talks already years about destination management. Here is your program. This industry talks already for a decade about a different segmentation, about balancing experiences for both visitors and your community, about sustainability, ecotourism, regenerative tourism, and what have you. Well, here is your chance. Do you, as an industry, want to slip back in the old game of numbers? Do you want to be seen as responsible for the next crisis, or do you want to live up to your full potential in providing the meaningful, deeply connected experiences that visitors are hungry for? Tell me, what do you have to lose, actually? Necessity is the mother of all inventions. And to conclude, I ask you humbly, if not now, after all of this, then when? I thank you. Over to Rodney.
Thanks, Frank, and thanks, Sarah. That was a really brilliant presentation. I know that both of you have been very busy working with our team over the last few weeks and maybe even a month now, and clients. So we all really appreciate you taking time out to crystallize all of your thoughts into this presentation. And I know, I even picked up a few new things listening to it again. So thank you for the effort that went into that. As I mentioned at the start of the presentation, our sessions in this virtual forum event have covered what destinations should be thinking about during the mitigation phase of the crisis. We're exploring ways to help our global industry collaborate and what we can do to make your lives easier at this time. And we believe it's really smart for people to collaborate and for us to all work together as we're facing very similar challenges, especially when you're all, obviously facing very tight budgets and teams that are more stretched than ever across a growing list of priorities. If you'd like to talk more about ways we might be able to collaborate, you can get in touch at destinationthink.com/join the network. And in listening to Frank's presentation just now, there's obviously endless possibilities that if we all work together. But one thing Frank just said that really resonated with me was that this pandemic and its impacts are not a surprise. And we're all now in the mitigation phase of managing this particular crisis. And what we're sharing from Destination Think at the moment is focused on mitigating the impact of COVID-19. But as Frank mentioned, this was predicted by many people, and we've come close 4 times in the last decade to various pandemics, H1N1, SARS, MERS, Ebola. But the risk didn't really enter our collective consciousness as an industry. Much of our work at Destination Think in the last few years has very much been focused on helping destinations to evolve their strategy to address local environmental impacts and also to manage the impacts of climate amplified events like wildfires and superstorms. But as Frank pointed out, we're also ignoring our industry's impact on climate through air pollution. And this may be a huge opportunity for our industry to work together. So I'll leave you with that thought and hand back to David to see if there's any audience questions.
Thanks, Rodney. Yes, we do have some questions. Some of the strategic questions that came in, quite thoughtful. Let's start with this one. And I'll invite either yourself or Frank or Sarah to join in on these. So the first question is, it's about kind of what choices a DMO has to make with limited resources at this time. Where do you think the priority is for a DMO? Invest staff time in supporting the mitigation phase, or save money for a restart campaign?
I can jump in to get us started. Based on all of the analysis that we've been doing internally as a team and all the discussions we've been having and looking at the activities in each individual phase and the priorities, what has become abundantly clear is that to be prepared and ready to meet the restart phase and evolve into the Reimagine phase with long-term benefits, for your industry, it's really, really essential to do planning now and get ahead of the curve. So my recommendation would be to invest time, as we've suggested, in doing strategic planning that maps out the most probable scenarios that will put your place in the best position of strength to be able to meet what comes and tackle it in the most strategic fashion. Because that way, the investments that you do make in the restart phase are going to go a lot further. And also, on the flip side of that, from what we talked about in terms of industry support, right now, some of the best ways that you can support your industry really involve walking alongside them and showing leadership in that way. So investing your staff's time and energy in some of the things we talked about today, being able to provide some meaningful advising on where and how to seek financial relief, being able to like brainstorm or drum up collective action on proactive approaches that can be taken to problem solving to engage your industry. A lot of it may involve engagement and facilitation. Right now, obviously, we know that for the most part, nobody is doing promoting aside from leveraging some organic channels to focus on keeping people dreaming about the future. So from a cost perspective, obviously investments aren't high at the moment. So being able to find those other ways to really act as a facilitator and leader right now is 100% worth your staff's time, effort, and energy, because the industry will remember that you were there for them during those difficult times. And then I would suggest, yeah, using this time as well to plan and prepare for the future is absolutely essential, so you can be as thoughtful in the restart phase as possible. I would turn it over to Frank and Rodney. David, if you have anything else to add to that.
Sarah, I think that answer was really good, and I want to try and empathize with the people who are in charge of destinations on the ground, especially in smaller places, and watching the industry conduct layoffs left, right, and center can't be easy. And I've heard from more than a few people around the world that there feels like almost a pressure to be doing the same. And I know the approach we're taking in our own business is to wait as long as possible to make any decisions, because everything is so uncertain, and to really try to gather as much information, get as informed as possible, and buy ourselves time, because every single day more and more information about timeframes, about the reality that we're going to be confronted with once we do get through this crisis in one way or another, gives you more and more foundation by which to make really good decisions. And it's tempting just to duck into your shell and cut costs wherever you can, but I would be just recommending for as long as possible, if that's days, weeks, or even a month or so, to wait, see what unfolds, and really get informed.
Thanks, Rodney, and thanks, Sarah. Okay, another question. So I think I'll direct this one toward Frank. This is about thinking toward the future. Do you think that this crisis will actually be a catalyst for developing a better foundation that leads to improved collaborations in a holistic approach to destination management?
Wow, that's a long question, David. There are many elements, right? Is this a catalyst? For sure. You can't avoid that. For developing a better foundation, that's a tricky one, right? Because a lot of DMOs are still in that stage now of layoffs, reduced budgets, no revenue streams coming in anymore. But honestly, what I see for the first time in my life, and I made a joke about it, I'm a bit older than 25 actually, is that there are two things now in the press. First of all, it's about economy and economics. And people see the value of tourism suddenly, right? These are huge streams of revenue for cities, and that dry up. On the other hand, there's a lot of pressure also from that movement, like, hey, we have coyotes in our street. How does that come? We have a zoo here in my city, and we have these cute images like the monkeys are lost. They don't know what happens. They miss the human beings. So people are very focused on how nature reacts at this moment. They all see the resilience of nature. It's bouncing back in some places already. So these two together, economics and ecology, as I can frame it like that, could lead that we are going to see the way we organize tourism for many, many years was actually a sort of treacherous love affair, and that we were really doped about the big numbers of the number of arrivals and the number of overnights, and that we're gonna build indeed a new model, a management model, where we really start to transform this industry and to help mitigate the impact of world's volatility and deliver on travelers' change appetites as well. Did you see the last report of UNWTO, 2017? That's the last one I'm referring to. There was an increase of number of arrivals with 6% in the world. There was an increase of money spent 3.7. This is not rocket science to understand this is not the right way, people. And another report of UNWTO says that the people between 20 and 30, they are eager to travel, but it should be meaningful. My own kids are in that age, and they are avid travelers because travel really adds something to you. It enriches your personal life. It also adds dynamics to a place. But they will be mindful about compensation of their fuels, and they will prefer alternative power engines above fuels, and so on and so on. So this was already happening, but as a catalyst, maybe it will speed this up. So I am hopeful about this, and the answer is simply yes.
Yeah, and I'd support that as well. I think that I've said a few times in the past week that, you know, I see what's going on at the moment as a great reset and a huge accelerator, and this is one trend that is already being accelerated. The DMOs that I'm seeing and speaking to and hearing about are all naturally stepping into a destination management role in one way or another, whether that's, you know, helping official channels with communication or helping their residents or their industry. That, you know, the types of activities that we're using as we switch off promotional advertising campaigns or hit pause on our marketing for promotional purposes is being redirected into helping the community in a variety of ways. And so it's already happening. And, you know, it was everything that I could do to stop Frank and from calling this presentation one about placemaking. And it's something we talk about a lot, the merger between managing a place and promoting a place. And, you know, most destinations that we see and work with still allocate a lot of their budget towards advertising, and communication is seen often as the primary function. And I think that's been slowly changing and evolving. You know, I said yesterday in the Q&A after our communications presentation that if you're worried about losing your advertising budget, don't be, because some of the most successful promotional efforts that I've seen in the last 10 years and more so come with very little advertising budgets and a whole ton of passion and advocacy bottom up. So yeah, I think this is a great accelerator towards destination management.
Thanks, guys. And thank you all for joining us today. I think we'll leave it there. It's great to be connected with you all once again. Everyone who's registered will receive the recording of this presentation by email later today. And we'll also make it available through our blog. And so we encourage you to share that widely with your colleagues. And I'll just leave you with an invitation as well. If you are sitting at the desk or now the virtual desk of your DMO, our Facebook group, our COVID-19 support group for DMOs on Facebook, I should say, is the place for you. So please come in and say hello, and you can find that just by going to our Destination Think Facebook page. We'd love to see you there. So thanks very much for being part of Destination Think Virtual Forum, and stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.